last 2 months, Prime Minister Modi has covered over 48,000 kilometers traveling across the country. He's addressed poll rallies, inaugurated projects. But his most interesting trip until now, in fact, his most significant trip until now, is to Jammu and Kashmir on the 7th of March. This is the Prime Minister's first visit to Kashmir after the abrogation of Article 370 in 2019. Joining me to discuss the import of this trip by the Prime Minister to Kashmir are Shah Faesal, Deputy Secretary in the Ministry of Culture, my colleague Aditya Raj Kaul, and my colleague Kartikeya Sharma in the studio here with me. Gentlemen, welcome to the News9 Plus Show. Mr. Faesal, I want to start by asking you, break down the significance of the Prime Minister's visit to Kashmir 5 years after Article 370.
I think for anybody like me who is from Kashmir, or like Aditya who has been watching Kashmir for at least for 3 decades or so, I think we can mark the contrast between the way visits of the heads of states or prime ministers used to happen to Kashmir earlier, before 2019, and the way it is happening now. I think one significant contrast would be that I recall that in maybe 25 years before this has happened, whenever a dignitary from Delhi would come in, the first reaction from there would be that Kashmir will mark hartal for that.
Right.
There will be law and order situations. I have been in the administration. We used to have a lot of headache in dealing with VIP visits from Delhi. But I can tell you, if you look at the social media space today, or if you listen to the conversations on the ground, the kind of enthusiasm, the kind of positivity, energy, which you are seeing in Kashmir this time regarding the Honorable Prime Minister's visit,
Right.
This is something unbelievable. I mean, Kashmiris these days, when they talk among themselves, they say something magical has happened. What is this, this appreciation, this acknowledgement, this welcome, this great spurt of positivity about? This is obviously about keeping the promise that was made in 2019. And
Right.
last 5 years, I think Kashmiris have got to witness by their own eyes that how things that were talked about, that there will be development, there will be opportunities for everybody. Moreover, there will be normalcy and peace in Kashmir. I think those things stand delivered today.
Right.
And that fulfillment of the promise, I think, makes this visit extremely important and different.
Fulfillment of the promise, in fact, Mission Kashmir. I want to come to you, Aditya, but first, before that, Kartikeya, to you. 2019, the Prime Minister made a very significant statement. He said that Kashmir could return to normalcy based on the Vajpayee formula of Kashmiriyat, Jamhuriyat and Insaniyat. And this would not be dictated by a handful of families. How has the Prime Minister gone about this in the last 5 years?
I think Prime Minister's initiative in Kashmir have been transformative. We have to evaluate Prime Minister Modi's efforts through 3 different lenses. One is political lens. Political lens, I would say it's the revocation of Article 370. Right. Which is a story of integration, which is a story of empowerment, which is a story of administrative and economic reforms.
Yes.
In this, there is another sub-story which is to break down the politics of exclusivism,
right,
which ties down to the 3 political families or 4
right.
political families in Kashmir. The only thing that has not happened right now is that the new middle class which is there, which wants to take the reins of power, has not been able to
yes.
fully express itself in elections.
Right, right.
So electorally, I think the families are still important, but socially, culturally, politically, I think things have moved. The second dimension is, which I think is the most important, is the sort of micro development that has taken place
yes.
in Kashmir. Imagine Srinagar as a smart city.
Yep.
Imagine apartments being built.
Yes.
When you go to Srinagar or Srinagar highway, whereby the large population which is there is, getting a place, because it used to be, people used to say everyone has a house in Kashmir.
Yes.
But that's, you can't afford to take that as a privilege with the population expanding. And the third and the foremost thing which I would say is the story of entrepreneurship.
Right.
Like if you go to Pulwama or you go to the Orange Orchard,
yes.
or the sort of business activity which is taking place in Srinagar, have been completely transformative at a social level.
Yes.
So that is number 2. And lastly, I would say that the Prime Minister has also, through the new architecture of the, which is the security grid,
Right.
has broken that cycle where people could take Kashmir Valley as hostage.
Yes.
No
That's right.
work, no school.
Hartals, as Shah Faesal
Hartals,
mentioned.
as he said.
Yes.
So there are a lot of things which are being worked upon, and it has been given a political direction. You see,
Right.
most of these policies existed, but Prime Minister has been able to give it a political direction.
Yes.
It creates a sense of purpose in the civil society.
Right.
That is why you have rappers in Kashmir now.
Yeah, I remember that
I mean
series
to
that
say
you did. Yeah.
15 years ago,
Yes.
you couldn't have imagined a woman rapper in Kashmir.
Right.
So I think these are transformative changes.
Yes.
Changes are not incremental, they are transformative when it comes to Kashmir,
Right.
and that is how I would define Prime Minister Modi's effort.
Right, absolutely. And in fact, both of you, both Kartikeya and Aditya, have done two very interesting series on Naya Kashmir, how Kashmir has been transformed since 2019, mentioning exactly these points that Kartikeya raised about how civil society has kind of risen up to this challenge of peace and stability. But Aditya, you've been tracking Kashmir very closely now for decades. What can the Valley hope from Prime Minister Modi's visit now? What's the blueprint that you think that he's going to roll out when he visits tomorrow?
Sandeep, practically speaking, sky is the limit. Because for decades now, just like Shah Faesal mentioned, we as Kashmiris have observed a lot of politicians from New Delhi and from Srinagar. A lot of promises have been made. The National Conference said autonomy will be done.
Right.
At the same time, the PDP said self-rule would be done. BJP for decades said Article 370 would be abrogated.
Right.
When I heard for the first time in the middle of 2019
Yeah.
that Article 370 could actually go,
Yes.
it was unbelievable for me.
Right.
I almost laughed.
Yes.
But Prime Minister Narendra Modi has walked the talk.
Right.
He's made it happen.
Right.
So it's a realistic expectation that development,
Yes.
road to recovery, road to peace, is something that will transform Kashmir. Yes, it cannot happen overnight. But in the last 5 years, the kind of changes that we have witnessed, the biggest of all, the separatism backbone being broken completely,
Yes.
which had caused the hartals that Shah Faesal mentioned, that every time Prime Minister used to visit,
Yes.
every time there was a high-level delegation visit, there used to be a hartal. Lal
Right.
Chowk used to be closed down.
Yes.
Biggest of all, the schools and colleges for 6 months used to be completely shut. We
Right.
don't see any kind of those hartals for the last 5 years. We don't see internet being shut down in the last
Right.
5 years. So there is relative peace. Yes, terrorism cannot end. But
Right.
if you actually notice and study the terrorism graph, it has drastically reduced. At the same time, development is something that the BJP and the government has been talking about.
Right.
Same with Lieutenant Governor Manoj Sinha as well, who has been helming the affairs over the last few years. We are seeing a lot of infrastructure projects, railway projects, a lot of developments that are taking place. In fact, this time around, the Prime Minister's statement that has just come from the Prime Minister's office a few minutes ago says that different projects worth 5,000 crores
Yes.
would be announced during his visit on 7th of March. So I think there's a paradigm shift that the government has brought in the Kashmir Valley, and this shift can only be marked and reflected when society actually experiences it.
Right.
And this reflection is visible because not only was a successful G20 international summit for the first time held
Absolutely.
in Srinagar,
Yes.
but we see cinema returning to Kashmir. There's a
Right.
cinema hall after 30 years where
Right,
people are
right.
thronging. We see
Absolutely.
sports persons also coming ahead.
Yeah,
So
that's a
lot of
very-
examples,
That's
lot of hopes as
a
well.
very good point. Because,
Very
if you-
significant,
If you recall, there was a book. I'm forgetting the author. Everyone loves a good drought.
Yes.
So it's taking off from there, everyone loved the security deadlock there.
Yeah.
Because people benefited.
You're talking of P. Sainath's book.
Yes, P. Sainath's book.
Yeah.
So taking an analogy, everyone loved the crisis there.
Right.
Because crisis led to profit.
Yes.
Everyone loved the problems there because it led to a different sort of an employment.
Right, absolutely.
So
The
PM
crisis economy.
So to say PM has broken the back of that political economy.
Yes.
That is where the Kashmiri Renaissance is happening.
In fact, Kartikeya, let's quickly look in at that story that Aditya mentioned on cinema returning to Kashmir and why it's such a big deal. Let's take a look.
Kashmir and movies together wove magic. A magic that gave us Shammi Kapoor and Sharmila Tagore's Kashmir Ki Kali in 1964, Jangli in 1961, Roti, Daag, Kabhi Kabhi, Bobby, Janwar, as well as Bemisal.
सिनेमा और कश्मीर का बहुत गहरा रिश्ता है, घनिष्ठ जिसे हिंदी में कहते हैं।
इतनी खूबसूरत ये तस्वीर है, मौसम बेमिसाल बेनजीर है, ये कश्मीर है।
This was a love letter across the Dal Lake, the snow-capped mountains of Gulmarg, the majestic Chinars, and the beauty of Pahalgam. This was Kashmir in all its glory in 70 mm silver screens across India and the world. Terrorist groups, bombs and grenade attacks left millions dead, displaced, with shattered silver screens across Kashmir.
दस अप्रैल 1993 की बात है जब ये इलाका सब जल गया।
Today, after 32 years of conflict and terror, it's a new dawn for Kashmiris. The first multiplex in the valley, Inox, has risen from the ashes of the cinemas lost to rekindle the same love of Kashmir and its cinema halls in a young generation that has never had the movie watching experience in a theatre.
Cinema coming back to Kashmir after 35 years, significant change. And Shah Faesal, when do you think it is that, how many years will it take for a Prime Minister's visit to Kashmir not to make headlines, for us not to discuss it at all?
Yes.
You know, when do you think that could actually happen?
I think when you talk about future, I think one important document which we have not talked much about is, and very few people possibly know about that, is that Jammu and Kashmir presently has a vision document for 2047.
Yes.
So we know that we have a national vision now under the scheme of Amrit Kal.
Yes.
And likewise, J&K is actually working under the leadership of Prime Minister Sir and the Lieutenant Governor, Mr. Manoj Sinha ji. We are having a full-fledged vision for almost all the sectors.
Right.
So it's not something like a very random kind of an initiative being taken that, okay, we will do this, we will do that, a cinema will open here or a market from there. So there's a very systematic, organized effort being made at the governance, as Kartikeya rightly said, at the security level, at the social, at the economic, at the political level. And that vision, in fact, how it is already started to translate is that in last couple of years, we have seen that the GSDP in state, UT of J&K, it has grown higher national, at an average which is higher than the national average, number one. Number second, one important status which Aditya also mentioned is that around 5,000 crores worth projects are likely to be announced. I'll tell you for readers, an interesting way of comparing this would be that the IMF package which was given to Pakistan a couple of months ago, it was roughly around 5,600 crores.
Right.
So, and when the J&K budget actually discussed in the parliament earlier this year was around 1.18 lakh crores.
Right.
And the future, as we were talking about, that the J&K is expected to grow at a rate of 6 to 7%. The GDP is going to be at least 6 to 7 times in the next 25 years. We are expecting to double the GDP by 27, 28.
Right.
So phenomenal. And if you look at the fine print in that vision document, you will see hyperloop, things like multimodal transit systems, things like advanced AI and robotic technologies being brought in at the governance level, at the health, in the education sector. I think phenomenal change.
Streaming on News9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.